Back into the Ideas on Consciousness podcast, revisited after about a year or something like that. Today's guest is a builder who operates on the bleeding edge of how technology can heal rather than harm our social fabric. She's a UC Berkeley cognitive science alumni and a former president of this very club, Ideas on Consciousness. She has spent her career exploring the mechanics of the human mind and the digital systems we build to reflect it. And most recently, as the head product of HeadOn AI, she led the charge in using AI to facilitate dialogue on the world's most contentious topics, hopefully to make those conversations more easy. And she's also a member of the Human Energy Advisory Board, exploring the future of collective consciousness and the role of technology in ushering us into a more collective future. So please welcome the founder of Product Pulse and the voice behind Chronicles of a UC Berkeley student, Beata Gold.
Wow, what a what an introduction. I feel like that's pretty accurate, but it makes me feel like I'm working on a bazillion things, which is true.
No, you keep very busy from what I've seen. So yeah. But yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on and talk about all things consciousness today. And we'll dive into your interests and a little bit about the origins of IOC as well. But yeah,
Thanks
of
so much for having me.
course, of course. All right, so I guess we'll just get straight into it, kind of the origin story of IOC. I feel like a lot of people in the club right now don't really know kind of how it all happened. So this will be a little bit educational for everyone. So just to start off, you founded IOC with focus on like the heavy hitters, neuroscience, philosophy, and psychology. Looking back now that you've like graduated and you're doing your own thing now, what was the like original spark kind of that made you realize you wanted to kind of make this space where people can talk about consciousness and where I'm sure you found a place where you could explore it more for yourself.
Yeah, so like I was telling you earlier, but many people don't know this, it already existed during the pandemic, but it was a very loose group of people just meeting up and doing presentations on whatever area they were studying. So we had people who were studying neuroscience, people who were studying media studies, and computer science. So everybody would take turns presenting about something in their field, and then that that was made with the goal of turning those presentations into lectures. But then everybody graduated, and it was up to me and two other sophomores what to do with it because it was never like an established club. And two of them were like, we have other responsibilities and we're not going to do it. And so it was up to me really to decide whether to keep it alive or whether to just drop it. And I think really the spark was realizing that there weren't any other communities on campus devoted to this kind of exploration. And I was even my end of freshman year when I joined that club, that loose group of people, my roommate sent it to me, so I had leanings towards deep questions, but I wasn't like that deep yet. I didn't consider myself to a deep thinker yet, but
Right.
I was just drawn to it, and I felt like it would be a shame if it didn't exist, and that's what kept me going.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I kind of felt the same way with like how you said it. You didn't feel like you were like a deep thinker at first. I think it's hard to kind of feel like you can have, well, I mean, it just IOC gives you that space to kind of have an excuse to think about things that would, I guess you would think that you're a deep thinker after thinking them. But
Yeah.
it's very like freeing almost because I think for a lot of last year I felt like not that I was missing something, but then once I had these talks at like cafe hours and stuff, and with IOC, it felt like something that I needed to talk about, even though it wasn't. I mean, some people say that like talking about consciousness is like the most useless thing you can do because we can't really explain it, but it's very valuable in that you learn more about yourself the more you learn about what makes you conscious and everything. So it's really cool. Is there anything like in particular that really interests you about like just consciousness flat out that kind of led to why you really stuck with everything?
Yeah. I took a class my freshman year called Science of Human Understanding, and I feel like that really sparked it for me because it disproved empirical thought because empiricism relies on circular reasoning, which is like in order to validate that empirical reasoning is logical, reasoning being that we derive truth based off of evidence.
Mhm.
Pretty much the basis for scientific thought. But in order to believe that, you have to just have observed that it worked in the past. And so it relies on circular reasoning, and thus it doesn't really work. And so that was a big uprooting because I was raised pretty much like my dad's a doctor, so we were very empirical. And
Right.
so that uprooted a core belief of mine I'd had for a while and made me question things. And then the last quarter of the semester was devoted to whether machines can be conscious and if what regardless of that what ethical standards apply to them, and lots of thought experiments around that. And so I feel like the things that really drew me initially to this question was just trying to figure out how how the conscious experience arises and the brain mind body question, and if empirical reasoning isn't as sound as I thought it is, how sound is materialism. And then I took another class my junior year with David Presti. Is he still around?
Yeah, yeah. I have his book in my room right now because I think it's Psych C61. Uh, it's required reading, but it's a really good book. Really goes over basically everything in neuroscience.
Yeah. And he had like a seminar class called Expanding the Science of Consciousness, and you had to apply to get into it. It was like 15 people, very much inspiring how I formatted IOC's decal. And in that, we talked about fringe consciousness experiences like psychedelics and out of body experiences and near death experiences, the placebo effect, how like you can have a fake surgery and it can heal injuries that seem pretty basic and objective, like a knee. So there's some kind of knee procedure that's done, but then when they did a placebo surgery on it, it healed the same
Right.
without negative side effects. So it just all of these fringe experiences made me question our conscious experience and want to dive deeper into it.
Yeah. No, all the placebo medical studies are really strange to me. And specifically, in one of my classes this year, we kind of learned about hypnosis a lot. And I think for a long time, I kind of worked under the understanding that hypnosis was kind of a sham or like it was kind of a fraud thing. But apparently, there's like really real, like empirical studies where they used it to fix people's like very real like diseases or like afflictions.
Yeah.
Like I think the two most common ones were like getting rid of warts and getting rid of eczema, which was ridiculous to me. But I guess it's true and like it just goes to show like the power of like the plasticity of your brain, I guess. And like leading that into consciousness, like you said, it just kind of makes you wonder what really is the limits of the mind and like how restricted do we really make ourselves. But
Yeah, and it makes me want to live in a bunch of different places that are really far removed from American and Western culture because I feel
Mhm.
like my understanding of reality would expand dramatically.
Exactly, yeah. And even like things as like as simple as like language shape like the way you think so much.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I think literally English has like a less, I think you're less likely to think in like terms of we or in terms of like community because of how like, that might be more generalized to like American culture in general. But yeah, it just literally shifts the way you think and how you think of other people as well.
Hmm.
But yeah. Okay. Moving on to the next little bit. I'll explain a tiny bit about what IOC is doing now. I think right now our most recent dialogue was just animal consciousness, where we had a biodiversity scientist, a playwright, and an English professor, and also a neuroscience professor. And they all talked about like the different ways that we can interpret consciousness and not just living things, but kind of like the whole dialogue surrounded the idea that animals, whether or not they deserve consciousness and what can we apply consciousness to. Kind of like panpsychism always talks about like how everything has some level of consciousness to a degree. And
Yeah.
we are kind of exploring those concepts and how even like literature can contain consciousness or like plays, or
Mm.
even one of the bigger examples was like how a nation could technically be conscious if you really zoom out and look at all the different interacting parts.
That's
And
interesting.
yeah, and then the club has just been growing. We had a really great turnout to cafe hours earlier this morning,
Mhm.
and I think we're really excited to have big events going on in the external part of the club, and the committees are growing. It's a good time to be part of the club. We're going to be going through a little bit of a transition area for this next year, but I think I'm a bit optimistic on how it's going. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm really excited about like how many people come to cafe hours nowadays.
Today was probably our biggest turnout. We had I think about 10 to 11 people total, I think.
Nice.
It was really nice. But we've
Yeah,
had consistently, I think, around like 8 or 7. Yeah.
nice. That's so solid.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, just two responses. First, I feel I'm right now I'm having a little bit of a battle with vegetarianism because I love
Yeah.
meat. And I was vegetarian in college actually, and then my roommate was like did a little thought experiment thing where he was like, "Is it okay to have sex with animals?" And and we're like, "No, that's terrible." And then he's like, "Why?" And we're like, "Obviously because they can't have consent when you do something like that."
Right.
And he was like, "Well, what about do they give consent when you raise them in a pen and have extremely unethical living situation for most animals unless you're extremely careful about where you're sourcing your meat from and then to kill them?"
Hmm.
Like if according to that logic, you shouldn't be eating meat unless you're okay with having sex with
Yeah.
animals. And so I was like, shit, now I have to become vegetarian.
Yeah.
But I'm like
That's a
having I'm really struggling to become vegetarian again because I'm pretty athletic and I remember how I felt when I was vegetarian compared to how I feel when I'm not vegetarian, and it's difficult because on one hand I'm like we're animals and we're on top of the food chain, so we eat meat because we're that's just how nature works, and whoever's at whatever part of the food chain, that's what you eat. And on the other hand, I'm having like the ethical battle, and then I'm on the other hand, I'm like, do animals even have that degree of like at what line does an animal experience suffering? Because you can argue that like a fish doesn't, but a cow does, so I can steer clear of cows, but I can still eat fish, for example.
right. Yeah. That was an interesting conversation that came up during our animal consciousness podcast because it was a little ironic. The biodiversity scientist was actually the only one that that ate meat entirely. And I mean, they said it was more for cultural reasons because like their entire family kind of grew up around I mean, eating was like very sacred to them and like the way they had community when they cooked and stuff.
What culture is
But
it?
yeah, yeah, the culture, yeah.
No, no, no. What culture is it?
She's uh Colombian, so they really love I mean the way she's described it to me is that they just love eating and that's it. But yeah. And then the other three actually were either pescatarian or vegetarian or vegan. And
Mm.
it was interesting to see the kind of like arguments between them. Not like they weren't like hostile arguments or anything, but they were having pretty honest conversations about like, oh, then like at what point do you like what you said, at what point do you view consciousness as kind of a gateway to consent? And like what point does the consent not matter anymore because of the lack thereof of consciousness? But then we kind of came to the degree that you can't really know like whether something's conscious all the way, of course. And that you kind of have to make the argument for yourself because if you really just keep on looking in one direction, then you'll come to either extreme of just eating whatever or eating like vegetarian or vegan. And it was a nice honest conversation that kind of ended up happening. But yeah, I guess my overarching question for kind of like telling you all the stuff about the club is Do you think how does it feel to kind of like see the club continue to grow and like evolve? And I think we're definitely gonna try to do more like really big events and talkings or and talks next
Mhm.
semester. So I guess is it kind of what you imagined it would become?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I just wanted to finish the story too, because I missed parts of it. Um, so after I decided to continue it, I started doing presentations called Conversations on Consciousness, and it would hold me accountable for building the lectures for the class. And I spread the word about it by partnering with Consciousness Collective, which has a decal on neuroscience and meditation. And yeah, so that was the initial partnership. And then through that, I got the two facilitators who were the first to do it with me in 2023, 2022, something like that. And then, yeah, the three of us became really close, and it was really hard to start it because, you have to learn a lot of things like getting like a professor to be the person who approves it, and then all of these dumb deadlines
Yeah,
and administrative things
definitely.
like filling out the decal form thing that's so extensive, and then the person who was in charge of it would be like, you didn't do this thing right, and then we had to go over it again, this like 10, that 10-page thing that you have to submit when you're
Yeah.
applying for a decal approval,
Hmm.
and get everybody's signatures and blah blah blah, and then just to learn how to, like, when we were accepting people, we assumed that when we accept them they'll take that place, so we accepted everybody and then rejected everybody else, and then when people didn't show up we were like, shit.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was a big learning process. And so it was really small. And then getting people to come to all of these different things that we were doing, like when we started cafe hours, which was inspired by this book called At the Existentialist Cafe. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's like a summary of existentialism and the core philosophers there. And there was like Beauvoir and Sartre would meet. A lot of French existentialist philosophers in the 20s would just hang out at cafes and talk a lot about their thinking and share their work and everything that they're processing at that time. And so that gave me the idea to be like, instead of office hours, we can build a good community outside of the structured lecture time to have chill conversations and connect and be able to have more of a discourse with one another rather than like a teacher student relationship.
Right.
And also structuring the decal where initially we were doing it like a lecture. And so people would come in after a long day of classes, and then we would lecture at them for an hour or something like that. It
Mhm.
was just like took time to realize how to structure, and even the second decal where we did have more discussions and stuff, it was still figuring. I still wasn't really happy with the structure of the class because I feel like it's really hard to make it engaging. It's hard to sit for a long time and listen
Yeah,
and do anything, especially at the end of a long day. So I was never really happy with the structure of the course, but I feel like that was also a struggle, and getting people to come. So like a lot of the times nobody would show up for cafe hours for us. So
hmm,
hearing that you guys have consistent 8 people coming, which is a perfect size, I think,
yeah.
is really nice to hear. And then after we did 2 semesters of the class, during the second run through, me and one of the facilitators had a falling out, and the other facilitator and I finished off while she dropped off. And then the one who finished with me was like not motivated anymore to teach the class either again, and I didn't really want to teach it anymore either. So I was like, how can I continue the spirit of IOC without um having to do another decal? And that's where I came up with the dialogue series, because I was like, there's a lot of silos in knowledge areas, but everyone is kind of adjacent to consciousness, and it'd be very insightful to get all of these people to come together and discuss with one another and learn from one another. So, for example, the first one was on spirituality, and
Nice.
I invited a psychic and who else did I invite? Two Buddhists, dash panpsychists, and I don't remember, but you get the gist. Like a
Yeah,
whole
yeah,
bunch of people who have different specialties in spirituality, and it was really cool. But at the same time, like still not that many people showed up. Although actually it was a good number the first two times. It was like 20 people. But in my mind, I was like, that's not enough people. I want
yeah.
more people.
No, I know. We for the last one we had a really big, I don't know if you remember doing L 145. We had a really big room, and we ended up having a pretty good turnout of around like 35 people. But there's always just kind of that feeling of wanting to have more people kind of come and watch.
Yeah. You
Um,
guys had one that was sponsored by Celsius, right?
yeah, sponsored by Celsius, and then Art House and this cookie dough brand named Delicious. But yeah, it's a lot of
Wow.
fun.
What made that happen?
We just have a president who's really good at getting brand deals, so we're doing a good job. I was just joined by by Trevor and
Oh my
Ezra.
God. Hey
So
Yeah,
guys. Good to see
yeah,
you. I was just about to get to the part of the story where I handed it off to you.
great. Yeah. Crazy how all this happened.
Yeah. So yeah, then I did the dialogue series for my last contribution to IOC, and then I was graduating and my roommate was studying philosophy, and she was also president of philosophy forum. So I was like, "Hey Shannon, do you know anybody?" I was just like, this is probably not going to continue because I also started another thing that was an event, a 1 day event called Innovation Day, and I was like, these two things, it'd be so nice if they both continued after I left. So it was like trying to get Innovation Day to continue, and it wasn't looking very favorable. And same with IOC, it wasn't looking very favorable. And then I was just like, I'm just gonna ask Shannon because she probably knows somebody. And that's how she was like, oh, actually, I think Trevor might be interested. So then I reached out to
That's
Trevor,
right.
and it was super casual. And I had no idea that it would become such a it would just go up and up and up like it did. So maybe
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah. I owe a lot to Shannon. She was a good friend. We used to talk a lot in the philosophy forum, she and I and a cluster of others. Yeah, so it was kind of crazy when I got your text message. I was flying home from a conference in Philadelphia, this Alzheimer's disease conference. And it was just so funny. And I still tell this story. I got a text message, hey, do you want to teach a class at Berkeley? And I went, sure. So that's kind of just how everything else took off. And talking about the dialogue series, it's too bad, but Kiana, she's now over in Spain, but she really did something really quite incredible with the dialogue series. She really did went off and did all sorts of really cool things. So that was really incredible to see. And then after that, I think y'all spoke a little bit about Andrea a little bit. Um,
oh yeah, just
yeah.
briefly.
Andrea, you called her she's the president now. So
Yeah,
yeah. Sometimes they kind of just make the titles themselves. I've done that as well.
yeah.
Yeah. The presidente. But yeah, Andrea is a real killer too. She's been going
Mm.
across and she, set up all these brand deals. Oh my God. And did all these really big things. And we just got back from a thought cafe. And it was so crazy to see like Ezra had organized this thing. We go in there and there's what was that, like 9 people? Yeah.
Most ever, probably.
Yeah. And you might say like 9, that's not incredible, but I think it was. And like everybody had something really quite amazing to say. So it was this, it's crazy to see how things sort of continue. This like living, growing thing that kind of goes far beyond what you might have expected it to be. And it's crazy. And I mean, for my part, I'm leaving California in 2 months. So it's crazy to see that it's going to still continue after I'm gone and Kiana left and Beata, you left, and it's just going to keep on going. And that's so good to see.
Yeah, it's magical. And it's funny because Kiana wasn't that involved when I was doing the dialogue series. Like she kind of helped a little bit, but I was always like, "Ugh, I wish that she was more involved." And then when I offered her to take it over when I was leaving, she was like, yes. And I was super surprised because I thought that she would just enjoyed them and that she was, enjoy she didn't come to all of them. She came to I think two or three of them. So to see her having taken the lead on that and really done something with it is really nice to hear.
Yeah. You can never quite predict. I
Yeah, that's what I
realize
was gonna
this.
say.
Yeah, it's crazy, but I've been in. I started two different, or I started a club where I went to college, and then here I am now. And then I helped continue this thing.
Mm,
But every time I did it, I would give it to five or six different people, and you never know which of those five or
yeah,
six, if any at all, are going to go off and do this incredible thing. I've
yeah.
seen people where I had very high expectations for them, and then they fiddle off and don't do a single thing. And then I have some others where like I just they ask to be involved, and then next thing you know, you look back and it becomes this big leadership opportunity where not only they can do this great thing with this club, which to me is extraneous. It's more the more important aspect of it was watching as they realize themselves that they can do really cool and great things. Like they like this like namesake. I remember for the philosophy club that I had when I was a student at a place called Louisiana Tech. When I left, I had done all these like things for it. Had all these religious symposiums where all these different Christian ministries and Sufi Muslim groups could all come together and host these big symposiums where they could all discuss philosophy and like what they think God is and all this sort of thing. And then when I left, I handed off to a few people, and like it became this whole conflict where they all fought over each other for who could be the president and all this kind of stuff. And then shortly afterward, nobody did anything with it. It became nothing. And like I think it's so important to realize, and I think this connects to how incredible things went on after I left as well, is that it really the IOC is a mask, it's a cover for people to discover how incredible they can do things and how many incredible things that they can do. And it's so good to see that that continues to happen. And it's so good to see that we have people like Ezra and Nico and Andrea who can go off and continue down this line and continue to realize that they really can do quite crazy and cool things.
100%. Yeah, and then also Nico, I remember you were asking, you said that like a theme of mine is bringing together people. You said it in a much more eloquent way, but I just remembered talking about the dialogue series that I also just started a podcast called Strangers of New York City.
Oh,
Mm,
shoot.
that's a
Because I
cool name.
always talk to people on the subway and in life and stuff like that, just randomly. And and sometimes I see cool people and I'm like, I wish that I could talk to them and really dig their brains for an hour and a
Mhm.
half, like this. And so yeah, that's another thing that I've been working on the side. Very, but that's like super minor, but just the thought came to mind just now.
No, that's awesome. I've seen a couple podcast formats where people are just in New York City, like in the subway,
I've
and
seen
just
a few
talking to random
with like
people.
a credit card and like
Yeah,
holding up
Yeah,
Subway
yeah,
their
yeah,
Talks.
iPhone.
yeah.
That's
Subway
a
Talks is
popular
the
one.
best. I love that. Love that podcast. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't
so
even know if it's podcast or if it's just reels.
Yeah,
yeah, it might just be that.
yeah.
But
Either way,
I saw one about somebody being really mad about Big Nut instead of people just drinking milk, but they drink nut milk instead.
Oh,
oh, it's
that's
because of
funny.
yeah the
Yeah,
big nut,
because
the
of Big
silly,
Nut. Yeah.
silliest name I've heard today.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a podcast name.
Yeah, definitely.
Very
But
cool.
on the theme of kind of like creating conversation where people can kind of just talk about whatever or just talk more honestly with each other. With like head on, you say that head on can like probably if it can succeed with like the Israel-Palestine conflict, and like that's what head on's kind of gearing towards, kind of making people have more of a honest conversation about like whether or not they can understand each other. And then you said it will kind of like open avenues to other contentious topics. So what specific like AI enabled like ingredient could kind of allow machines to facilitate a conversation where humans have well really historically failed and just got made things kind of worse?
Yeah. So the thinking with that, first off, the goal is there's people who are able to successfully facilitate conversations, but those people aren't available at scale. So the first thinking behind Head On is just being able to scale effective facilitation. But as we were building the product, we realized that we don't want to take away the agency for human beings to be able to engage in this conversation. So a lot of the time people think that Head On is building a AI facilitator for these conversations, but we kind of steered away from that and rather focused on building tools that would enable human beings to have productive conversations. And one of the main ones that I thought was most useful that we were building was being able to summarize people's perspectives in ways that both sides would agree with their perspective, because when you're having a heated conversation with somebody on the other side, it's very easy to demonize the other person's perspective. For example, like in an extreme case, you can say that a settler and a West Bank Palestinian are having a conversation with one another, and obviously the Palestinian's gonna call the settler a terrorist and you know a psychopath for like stealing their land and killing their people. And then on the other hand, the settler is gonna say that these people and a colonizer, and then on the other hand, the settler is gonna call Palestinians terrorists and that they are colonizers because they settled on the land after the Jews did in his mind, right? And and so it's not a very productive way to summarize the other side's perspective to just call them something inflammatory. And so if those two descriptions were written out on a screen, both would disagree with that. But the AI is good for being able to illustrate the other person's perspective without the inflammatory language and without the emotion. And you can train it so that, or prompt it in a way that minimizes, like if its objective is to make it as uninflammatory as possible, then obviously the challenge lies in making these things not have a bias. But you can, if the objective is to reframe it in a way that is uninflammatory, and that, like if the settler says, the description of a settler's perspective is like protecting the land of his people for security purposes, expanding Israel's boundaries for security, because a lot of settlers believe that they're doing it for security reasons, and also having a biblical right to the land. And then the settler would be like, yeah, that's an accurate representation of my perspective. And likewise, the Palestinian West Bank resident would say, um, a native to the land has a genetic or a national right to be able to live there with security and safety, and if that security is infringed upon, has the right to defend himself, right? So those would be perspectives that both sides would be like, okay, yeah, that is sufficient, and that would help. um I mean that it's like easy to go into a very deep rabbit hole into
Mm.
this stuff, because even it's been like 6 months since I worked there, and a lot every week we had different epiphanies and realizations. So I'm kind of giving you a very specific example of the kind of thinking we had, but that's a very specific example of the general way of thinking that we had towards navigating these conversations. But it's really cool because that community is still very vibrant and very alive, and we're always experimenting with how to manifest these kinds of conversations and how to utilize what the current manifestation of head on to be able to have these kinds of difficult conversations. But another really interesting takeaway, but yeah, that's like one example of like all the things. And then another really interesting takeaway we had was the fact that having text communication immediately inflames people much more than having a verbal communication conversation, because you're not able to hear a person's intentions when you're over text. So if somebody reads something through text, then they can read it as something inflammatory and said with bad intentions. Whereas when someone says something that is inflammatory but with their voices, then it usually increases the probability of having a productive reaction from the other side, even if it is inflammatory, because some people everybody has gaps in their knowledge bases. And if somebody knows that person comes from the other side, but they have gaps in their knowledge bases and what they're saying is said with good intentions, then a lot of the times people are more willing to be patient than if they don't catch that, which you can't catch that over text.
Right. Okay. So, and like in this context, then you're using AI less as a mediator, but just as a tool to make each side's like argument more digestible. And
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
to minimize miscommunications because at the end of the day, most of it comes from miscommunication.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely one of the most prevalent issues in terms of politics today in general.
That's why Twitter is so toxic. That's why I said the text thing, because Twitter is all text, except in spaces, but even spaces can be really toxic because they don't have any tools to reduce miscommunication.
Hmm. Yeah. No, Twitter's definitely one of the most toxic places I've ever gone on rabbit holes down. I think if you go down a thread, you can see at least a couple death threats or something like that.
Most
But
certainly, yes.
yeah. But yeah.
Oh, and I'm afraid I wanted to come by and say hi, but I do need to run. But it was wonderful seeing you again.
Yeah, good to see you after a long hiatus.
No kidding. Yeah, always good to see you. And Ezra, Nico, well done as always. And I'll catch y'all on Wednesday, actually, all their
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Wednesday
Yeah,
yeah.
of
event.
course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
doing like a big social. So
Yeah,
looking
Yeah.
forward
a
to
little
seeing it before I
socialize.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
Well, I don't want to interrupt, so please continue.
Okay.
Yeah. Good job.
Yeah. I'll
All
see
right.
you.
Trevor.
So yeah.
Trevor's the reason ISC is alive, so shout out.
Yeah. Same to these two and Andrea, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
I'll see you.
See you later.
See ya. All right. Okay. Shift over real quick. All right, yeah. So yeah, this is Ezra.
Hey.
He's
Yeah.
your VP right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
vice president.
I mean,
So
it's all arbitrary titles, but
I
yeah.
mean, it's true though. You and Andrea do most of the work in the club.
Yeah. I helped her out a lot, and then yeah, and then Trevor got me in, so I'm like the third. We're the third generation of IOC, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah. What would you
really,
say your main contributions are right now?
um. I haven't really done, I mean, Nico's really good with the dialogue panels. So, and then of course, like the podcast stuff. So I feel like mostly like my role has been just like taking what Trevor did, which was like the thought cafes and making sure that kept going. And then, Andrea's just been really good with like marketing
Yeah.
and me and her just like making sure the decal was alive.
Hmm.
And so just like helping with all the administrative stuff. And like, I feel like a large degree of IOC or like any organization really is you need like communication, and you need like a
Hmm.
central hub. Trevor's like, he just like, he talks so much, but he's like so interesting. He's like really nice. So you need someone that everyone knows so that everyone kind of knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And so I knew Andrea and then I sucked his soul into the club. So that's kind of how I feel. I don't do anything that crazy. I just kind of like help everyone out a little bit, you know, and then do like the thought cafes. I guess like the events too, like the field trips. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're basically everything external.
Yeah. So I do all that and then I help Andrew with the administrative stuff. So I think probably next year when she leaves, I'll just be doing all of the administrative stuff and the
Hmm.
event stuff. I don't know. We
Yeah,
need, we need more people.
we do.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
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 But yeah, it's been going all right. But yeah, I mean, you were talking about like being like needing a person just between everyone to make everyone happy, right? But I mean, that's kind of like your is it the most recent project? Project Pulse?
Product post. Yeah, I was gonna say it's like the role of product management sounds like that basically.
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I think it's crazy that you started the decal in the club because I was saying this to Andrea, but it's like so hard to do anything with like the bureaucracy. So I'm just in
You
complete,
missed it earlier. I was complaining to Nico about how hard it was to start the thing. It's very hard to start things, and it's funny when you are doing it because you don't obviously you don't know what's gonna come of it, you know?
Mhm.
yeah.
You always have to ask yourself if it's worth doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in complete admiration of you. That's just all I have to say because it's like I don't think
No,
there's really
it's really impressive.
no,
Yeah.
it's really like badass. And then there's like no other club at Berkeley that's like we have Consciousness Collective, but they just do like
They
meditation.
apparently they've been around since the beginning of
Apparently,
actually too. They
consciousness, really
Yeah,
interesting.
they helped kind of launch it.
Yeah, I think. Oh, really? Fascinating. Oh,
Yeah, I
interesting.
use them as a launching pad.
Oh, fascinating. I think they died out and then they had a resurgence. That's what
Yeah.
happened.
Although somebody said they're a little bit culty.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I don't
I'm
know.
not surprised.
Yeah, you need
Yeah.
that community aspect.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was on their board actually.
Oh,
Oh wow.
wow.
Yeah,
I always
like
saw them. Yeah.
That's a good point.
IOC board member because we
Oh.
were sister clubs, so I was the representative
Oh.
Oh.
for that. So I was in the board, and
Oh. Uh-huh.
even then, I mean, I really admire what they do because they do the meditation club, the meditation retreats out there, which I
Yeah.
went to, and that was really cool. Just how they organize a whole bunch of people. I think just like when I went, there were at least 40 people that went, so it was really impressive
Oh
in
wow.
Mendocino County. So actually, I went to two of them, but yeah. So I really respect what they do, but also it is definitely I don't know how it is now, but even then I felt like I wasn't really a part. I was always an outsider,
Hmm.
Mm.
and even though I was on the board, and I don't know how everybody else felt who is a part of the board, but it's like a very the founder, I forgot. Harriet. He's cool. He's very cool. He's very hippie. He was dating somebody, I can't remember her name, and they were kind of the co-founders of it. And oh no, not Harriet, Harrison. And he is like a classic hippie vibe. And that's what I told Nico yesterday when we were talking a little bit when I first got the offer to merge or create a partnership with Coco. I went over to Harrison's house and they were having a Coco meeting, and it was in front of this building, this house that was just like kind of caught like I don't even know how to describe it, but everything around it was overgrown, so you can't even tell what the building looks like. And there's just a bunch of plants growing everywhere, and lavender, and this hexagonal dome thing.
Hmm.
And then we're sitting in a circle in lawn chairs and stuff like that. And one of his roommates is like a bee guy. He's really cool too. I really like him. I actually liked him the most because he actually seemed really like grounded, even though he's kind of really also an airhead too, but in a good way. Like I'm trying to think of the word. I don't know, but just very happy-go-lucky guy. And he was like walking around. He's like, "Do you guys want honey?" And giving people satchels of lavender. I'm trying to paint the picture of what the vibes were like, but it was very hippie, but it didn't feel full. I feel like it was an attempt at being a hippie, but not fully getting there because it still felt very individualistic.
Hmm.
Right. Okay.
And so it never felt genuine to me. It felt like they were living up to an image of what real hippies are like, and it never felt like it was carried out in a genuine way. That was kind of my feeling when I was in that community.
Right. Kind of
Interesting.
like marketing for the hippie audience, but not really. Okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I mean they've reached out to us before, right? Or
Go go.
something?
No,
No?
I was taking a Cog Sci 1 Introduction to Cognitive Science, and it was at the beginning of the year. I messaged Professor Davina Chan and about like promoting the
Great
club.
class. I took neuropsych of happiness with her.
Oh,
Yeah,
he's
I'm
in the
taking
class right
yeah,
now.
yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a really good class, but I asked her if she could promote the club and she did. And then she messaged me and I guess someone else in that class was reviving Coco. So she was like, okay, feel free to talk to each other. And so I think that now my memory's kind of hazy now because it's been a little bit, but I think I
Yeah.
reached out, I was like, oh, hi. They didn't reply. So from that day onward, I treated them like sworn rivals,
Yeah.
Not really. They kind of do different
It was
things.
just the one poster you put over.
Yeah, there was a poster for Coco. So I didn't put our poster on top of it, but I put it like above it.
Just to establish dominance.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
They
We are
kind
the
of
dominant consciousness club at
yeah,
Berkeley.
that's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
So I have to have some pride, right?
Yeah.
And then they don't even, well, now we don't have a decal, but whatever. That's besides the point. They we're
They don't
uh,
have a decal anymore?
Did Coco have a decal? I have no idea.
Yeah.
They used to? Oh,
Yeah,
Oh,
yes,
yeah, yeah. They had a meditation and neuroscience decal. It was really big.
oh shoot, I don't think they
I
It
have.
would
don't.
always fill up, and there were like 40 at least in that class.
40.
Wow. Wow. I don't think they have it. They've
No.
fallen from
Well, you
grace.
said they
Yeah.
just revived it,
They
right?
just revived it.
Yeah.
That's true. There's another decal. I forgot what it's called. It's on like psychedelics. Um, that's probably like the new one because I know they do stuff like that. It's pretty big. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah,
Maybe we need to have a competition with Coco or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they just do different things. I was originally worried that they were trying to take our place, but it seems like they're much more integrated into the consciousness
Yeah.
ecosystem of Berkeley than I thought we were. I had no idea we had
Yeah.
ties.
Well, they
Yeah.
stay in their lane. So, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
just remember we used to be sisters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
that's very cool. Yeah. Can I no, forgive me if you've asked this question already,
Mhm.
but I need to know why did you start like the club and like because it's really cool, but like I said, it's like so hard to do anything. So I feel like that requires a lot of sacrifice, like personal sacrifice of time and effort for something that you didn't even know was gonna like fly, you know? I don't know.
Well, that's kind of the lesson is that everything I do after a certain point is I always have to ask myself if it doesn't pop off, is am I still enjoying the process of doing it? Because at the end of the day, there's always going to be a high probability that things don't work out. So I just enjoyed it. But yeah, I don't know, Nico, should I repeat it or
Oh, no,
should
you don't have
everyone just
to.
like listen
Yeah, you don't have to
listen
Um,
repeat
to the
it.
first part of the podcast
Oh,
again?
yeah.
well, basically, it was already existing a little bit, but it was like smaller lectures. But I
Okay.
mean, she just, like she said, she enjoyed doing it and she wanted to do it for herself, kind of, because she liked having the
I see.
conversations.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
Okay.
that's the gist of
Yeah. No
it.
need to repeat it. Yeah. I had no
Okay.
idea.
Just
No.
listen
Yeah,
to the beginning part of this.
yeah,
Okay.
Because I go into detail, but I feel like if I go into detail, that'll take another 10 minutes.
Yeah. No
And
yeah.
worries. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But okay. Moving on to human energy. So you're an advisor for human energy. You explore I didn't even know this term before I did research for this, but the new sphere.
yeah.
Um, like kind of like the idea of a collective idea or human thought sphere. So do
Hmm.
you view AI as a sort of it's kind of a weird analogy for this, but a digital like nervous system that will kind of finally allow collective consciousness to become self-aware, or I guess by self-aware I mean more like efficient and coherent.
Will AI, the developments in AI allow it to become more sufficient, efficient, and coherent? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Well, definitely. So okay, first off, I want to say the story of how I joined Human Energy because it's neat
Hmm.
and it's related to IOC. So me and the facilitator that stayed from the beginning to the end of it, her name's Sam. You should definitely invite her to the podcast too because she has a very different area of specialty. She's like she's an artist and she does jewelry and makes content and also is working for human energy, much more involved in human energy, and also, yeah, she's just really cool. She has a lot of really cool things that she does, and it's very different. She's more artistic than I am, and I'm more like tech oriented. So definitely bring her on. So Sam and I saw a flyer for a conference that was at UC Berkeley, and it was related to consciousness. And I have this thing that whenever something cool is happening, I'm always like, let me volunteer so I can get free access to it.
Mhm.
Like concerts and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
Like I always volunteered outside lands. When I was at Berkeley, I went to outside lands a few times from volunteering. But anyways, I reached out to the people who were creating this conference. It wasn't associated with UC Berkeley. They just were using a venue at Berkeley, the I House, and I was like, can we somehow help out? And we ended up going to this conference on collective consciousness or something like that. And I had such a fun time. And they had a round table. And that round table inspired me to do the dialogue series.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they had a round table on AI and technology and consciousness there. and pretty much they'd have a question on the screen, and then different people could come up and offer their perspectives on that question. And that was like pure euphoria for me because all these people, they weren't like our age. It was kind of ironic. No UC Berkeley students were there, and I felt like that's just the epitome of UC Berkeley is students are all they all have tunnel vision on the things that have the most clout, but there's so many great opportunities that are underutilized, like office hours with amazing
Yeah.
professors, for example. And this is another example of it being at literally at iHouse and nobody's going to it. But all these people have like extremely high credentials in different areas, and it was an amazing opportunity. And just hearing their perspectives on stuff like that, and I was like, this is so cool, and I want to do more. I want more of it. And then it happened that that group, Human Energy, they put on conferences every so often, like the one at UC Berkeley, exploring certain elements and innovations that are relevant to human consciousness. And they happened to have a youth board and were looking for more people. And so when we came and we were just involved in the conversations and talking to a bunch of people, they invited us to join their board, and that's kind of how it happened. And then because we were on the board, which is a very light commitment, it's just I don't even know what we do honestly, but we were able to go to their next conference, which was in Morocco.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
So last winter, not the most recent one, but the one before that, me and Sam, even though we'd already graduated and weren't together as much, had a reunion in Morocco for this conference. And anyways, I just wanted to say that story because I felt like it was super relevant to IOC going back.
Oh,
So from that roundtable, from that first conference, I thought my biggest takeaway was about AI and that oftentimes it's portrayed as this ethereal, intangible machine monster thing that's scary and has its own agency and existence. And what came out of that conversation is that the way that AI is trained, it's just a bunch of data. And so the best way to think about it is just a representation of humanity itself because it's just a web of information of all of us. So that's how I view AI. And as more and more information and data is poured into it, it's just going to become more actually, as I say it, it's going to become more convoluted and accurate and useful in some regards, but also we already see that when you put too much context into an LLM, it starts to glitch out and perform worse. And you see that with vibe coding tools too. Like you build something and you're like, I want to build this productivity tool that has a calendar and da blah 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 whatever, and it pulls out a really cool prototype. But then as you start adding more and more nuance to it, like right now, let me just tell you something more specific. Like I've been working for the past year just for fun, barely at all, but on this idea called word of mouth, which is like a crossover between Reddit and Yelp, and it's just a recommendation social media, so like Reddit, but only for recommendations, and you can crowdsource recommendations either from your friends or just a public group that has similar interests or just to individual people. And when I started it, it looked amazing. It was really exciting, but then you start having to fix very technical things. For example, like I want to be able to save the thread that I posted, right, in a certain folder. And then I need it to have a successful authorization process that's functional and doesn't glitch out. And all of these small functionalities, as I'm trying to vibe code that, it starts to glitch out because now it's building on a code base that isn't designed by a senior engineer. It's not thinking about architectural principles like senior engineers are, and so it needs to get to that kind of level in order for it to be able to build on top of a lot of code because it's not organizing it in a way that coding principles that you learn from experience and like 10 years of being an engineer gets you. And so that the question of like this is what I'm looking for, and I'm excited to see what happens with all these data centers and the complexities of LLMs as more and more data is inputted. Is it going to get more accurate and more efficient, like you're asking, or is it going to kind of implode on itself because there's just too much data and too much context to navigate through, and it becomes dysfunctional as a result? And what are we going to do about that when that problem arises?
Right. Yeah. And I think definitely one of the more important questions is become more reliant on AI throughout the years.
But I feel like the biggest takeaway for me, and I feel like the problem with sci-fi is that we kind of are from the sci-fi we're able to get afraid of AI because it's like a corpus, but in reality it doesn't have agency, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of fear of like AI, and I need to look into it because I think it is a real threat for sure, but it's just hard for me to wrap my head around it now that I feel like it's just a web of information, of human information, rather than an actual entity that can have motivation. Like the classic AI is going to take over the world because it's so smart and has its own motivations.
Right.
That's one thing in my mind that it lacks.
Right. I guess real quick, do you think something can be conscious without any agency?
Well, I think that agency is a symptom of consciousness,
Hmm.
but I think that you can be conscious without having agency. I feel like, well, that kind of dives into a question that you wanted to ask me later. I don't remember which one exactly, but
Oh.
yeah.
Well, we can leave that for a little bit later then.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'll touch base on that when we get there.
Okay. Yeah.
I think
But
that's a
yeah.
good question though.
So I guess you spoke about how human energy kind of like shaped how you went forward with ideas on consciousness a little
Mhm.
bit, but I was wondering how kind of like on the opposite side of that, how your time as president of IOC at Berkeley kind of shaped how you view the human energy problem or the human energy project in general. Like, was there like a specific debate or like idea on consciousness in the club that led you to believe that technology was kind of like the next step for just kind of streamlining humans in general?
Can you elaborate on what you mean by streamlining humans?
Kind of like what I spoke about before was like next step for human like evolution, basically.
Oh,
Transhumanism.
Yeah, vaguely, yeah, yeah, transhumanism.
um, yeah, I just like I said, I think it's just the next step. It's like the next big technology. So we had the printing press, then we had computers, and now we have AI. It just
Mhm.
is the next
Next
major
logical step.
evolution. Exactly.
Can I ask what exactly is like the Human Energy Project? Is it like
Yeah, it's kind of hard. It's hard to concretize, I'm not gonna lie.
mhm.
But basically, it's this organization devoted to solving human problems on a global level through
Hmm.
the idea of the noosphere that which means mind sphere. Nous means mind.
I see.
That we're just one collective entity, and it's very much symmetrical to AI because just like AI is a web of information, so is humans a web of people, and thus we should solve these global problems as a collective.
I see. So okay, taking it back. And you're really not afraid of like agentic AI at all? It's just
I
interesting.
am afraid of agentic AI, but not because I think that AI can become agentic, but rather what humans can do with it.
Right.
I see. Yeah.
And that the data that the AI is trained on can influence its behavior because humans have bad
Bad data.
motivations
Like
and
the
intentions,
the
and if
Tesla.
it's trained on that data, then it will adopt those intentions as well. But I don't think that it itself can generate its own negative and harmful ambitions.
I
Yeah.
see. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it was the Tesla dream, the
Yeah,
training data.
the self-driving cars, yeah, if you look at how they're trained, there's not even like an inherent like intention of racism, right? But just very naturally like a lot of footage that
Exactly.
like these companies use. I think it's like it's on weird populations, which is
Oh
Western.
yeah, yeah.
Uh
Educated,
yeah, I
rich.
forget yeah.
Wait, so what are you referencing to with the Tesla thing?
Like the data and so specifically I think they had issues where people who had darker complexion of skin were
Yeah.
not recognized as humans by these early car demos
Yeah.
because the data is mostly focused on white males in these Western countries, right? And so there is like this natural bias so yeah
100%.
yeah
There's a lot of also in health tech, I know that there's a lot of issues with racism
yeah
because of the data
Hmm.
set, but I'm also saying that so that's one level of it is the issue with the kind of data that you're feeding an AI, but then the second issue is that it can be racist because, for example, it ingests racist text,
Hmm.
mm,
like
Yeah.
articles, for example, or or something like that. Whatever is more widely available, it'll adopt, and so it can become racist. But it isn't inherently racist. It's racist because the things that it ingested was inherently racist motivated
Okay.
text. So
Yeah.
I'm not just saying that like the data is the issue. I'm saying that the data is the issue, but like there's a difference between the data set lacking relevant demographics and the data set itself having racist motivations. Like if it's fed, I mean, I don't, I'm struggling to articulate this in an example, I think, but
Hmm.
because like there's not obviously right now we're not inherently racist people, but like let's talk about something else that is more relevant, like the Israel-Palestine conflict and how America is very pro-Israel. Um, for transparency with where I stand on the Israel-Palestine conflict, I'm like a very balanced person. Like I'm pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel in the sense that I have family that lives in Israel and I have skin in the game with that. And I also think that what's going on in the West Bank and in Gaza is very atrocious and needs to stop, and there needs to be some kind of solution. And I'm kind of solution agnostic as long as both people get the rights that they deserve. And yeah, I know that's problematic because it's very easy to say that. But as someone who's wrestled with this for years now, that's where I'm at.
Hmm.
Anyways, that's just for transparency purposes.
Hmm.
Um, so like yeah, America is pro-Israel, historically has been very pro-Israel, right?
Right.
So if the AI is fed American articles on the Israel-Palestine conflict, it's going to inevitably adopt a pro-Israel stance. So that's pretty much what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
It's not just because there's like a lack of demographic range that's actually representative of the sample. It's also that the bias can become adopted
Yeah.
when it's
It's like digital environment kind of shapes its biases. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, I guess I kind of want to know how far your like ideas on collective consciousness go. I guess it kind of also addresses the whole like robot takeover thing, but if we are moving towards a more like collective consciousness, like let's say something like human energy really takes hold of the world kind of through technology specifically and maybe AI. How do we kind of like protect individual agency and like those like quirky human traits? Or
yeah,
like do you think they're like not at risk at all, really?
yeah. So that's the question I was referencing to earl just like 5-10 minutes ago
Hmm.
about agency. Um, I think that we already exist in the world. A lot of people are like, "Oh yeah, live again outside of the matrix" type of thing. And yeah, I think we kind of already have to ask ourselves that question on the day to day because we choose after you guys graduate, which is already a part of a standard pipeline process where we go to high school and then we immediately go to college and then we immediately get a job and we work a 9 to 5 for the rest of our lives. So the question of agency already is extremely relevant, and it's something I think about a lot because even though I was working at the startup, I worked I tried to work in different mechanisms. Like one time I tried working 4 hours and then taking a 3 hour break and then finishing up my work day rather than a 9 to 5. And I experimented with structures like that. And then I basically just realized, and now as a trainer, my schedule is in the mornings I work. So I usually have my first client at 7 a.m. and I finish around 11. And then I have free time until the evening around 4 or 5. And then I have a client or two. And it's kind of making me realize that I can never work a 9 to 5. Like it really
Yeah.
sucks to work a 9 to 5. And but everybody does it. And I watch people, the gym I work at is a part of a corporate building. So I'm always watching people as they shuffle out for their lunch break and they get their slot bowl and they come back in. And it's like, where's the agency here? You know?
Yeah. It's very
But
automatic. Yeah.
yeah. And that's just what is respectable in our world. That's just the norm. So
Hmm.
I think AI definitely brings the agency question back into the picture. I mean, not back into it, but it adds another level to the
Right.
question of agency. But I don't think that it's not a new question, you know? And I think the great
Right.
thing about our generation is that we're actually really thinking intentionally about it. Like
Hmm.
a lot of us are pursuing alternative paths outside of corporate kind of lifestyles. Um, but yeah, I wanted to say that, and that was the thought process that the question prompted, but I'm curious if you could elaborate a little bit more on what you're getting at in terms of agency within the context of AI.
I guess kind of like what you said about like corporate and like corporate takeover kind of in culture. Um, Basically like we're kind of moving towards like an optimization, like optimizing everything. And at one point, does that like kind of optimization kind of get rid of all the like what somebody would see as like unnecessary things where like, oh, if you want to do something, but it's not efficient or it's not like what
Yeah.
you should do.
Yeah, I think you can see AI as that, but I think the reality is that with every single job, there's a lot of mundane elements to it. And right now, the way that AI is being implemented in enterprise is getting rid of the mundane bullshit that exists in a lot of people's jobs. Um, so right now, it's at a time, it's actually really great because that opens up a lot of time for building and creative thought and really connecting and getting off from your job again.
Right.
So, yeah, I think the risk for sure exists that you can, people can become so obsessed with optimizing that they lose very critical elements of creativity in work. But also, we went from having fully remote jobs to a lot of companies are now requiring basically in-person work.
Right.
And according to optimization principles, you would want to be remote because you would minimize commute times and crossover conversations in the office that isn't necessarily productive, but those are elements that are extremely important in order to make work optimized at the end of the day. And so you
Right.
can try to be extremely mechanical about it, but I think everyone's going through a learning cycle as with each of these implementations and changes in the technology that you think it's going to do one thing and then it's actually going to be another thing. And that's the same with jobs. A lot of tech jobs are getting uprooted right now, and I'm really glad I'm not in it right now
Mhm.
because it's a very serious upheaval of what has been. And I'm right now kind of at a crossroads where I'm like, I know that product management is going to be basically unrecognizable And so should I get back into it while it's still familiar, or should I just wait until things cool down and the tumultuousness of everything cools down and I'll have to learn a whole new skill set, but it'll be much better and it'll be fun to learn that and then be able to re-enter instead of riding that roller coaster that it is right now. Um, so yeah, I feel like I had one more thing to say, but I'm forgetting. So basically that's my thinking about all of that.
Yeah,
But
no.
honestly, this is another thing I want to say about Berkeley is that I feel like Berkeley dehumanized me a lot. I feel like I and the culture here is, unless you find the right people, and it seems like you guys have a good group. But I always, when I was at Berkeley, I felt like I struggled to find people that I really felt like were my community. It's not, I had friends, I had lots of different groups I was a part of, but it's like if you don't find those people, it's very lonely. And I definitely felt, I didn't feel lonely, but I felt like it was cold there. And I feel like that's just the culture is that if you're not constantly doing something productive, then your worth is negligible. And so it took me a long time to undo that internalized lesson where
Mhm.
I was like at Berkeley, I time blocked everything and I was always doing something. And I still like to do a lot of things in my life, but I realized that what I had learned and I worked actively to unblock that and kind of humanize myself again and start, having dinners with my family and just chilling and not necessarily having to have every single moment be allocated to some kind of output.
Yeah. No, it's a big part of, I guess, the just like I don't know. You've described it a lot where it's like
I despise it.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not from. I don't know if it's like a Californian thing
I
or
think
a
could
big.
be.
Yeah, but I'm from Colorado, so that's like
Uh-huh.
like I don't know what's in Colorado. We got Casa Bonita, we got South Park, and we got the mountains. But there's not too much opportunity. People are there transiently, usually for a job, but everyone there is for the outdoors, and so. I think that was like the first thing that the biggest shock to me when going to California was two things, and it was like the hustle culture, like
Hmm.
people work, 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 work all the time, and it's not about leisure time, which is so opposed to what I'm used to. Or I think it's important to be motivated, but sometimes I just sit there and you do nothing. I feel like that's very gratifying. And people don't, even when people literally have nothing to do, they don't do nothing. They go on their phones and then they don't give themselves a break. And I feel like
Yeah,
that's such
exactly.
a waste because you get so many good takeaways and I feel like only when you have nothing do you know what you want, right?
Hmm.
And so there was that. And then I also have like the very strong impression, and he knows because I keep like going on about it, but people are very like, I don't know how to describe it, like almost like performative or like they put on a
Hmm.
facade here because they're not interested in making friends or like developing like real relationships, or maybe they don't know how to, but it's more about making connections.
Yeah,
So it's like it's kind of a very competitive environment, and so it makes you more productive. But
very like
yeah,
transactional
yeah,
relationships
that's
too.
right.
Yeah.
But at what cost? Because at the end of the day, what are you racing to? I feel like
Hmm.
it's a treadmill of destruction. You're just going to run forever, and you're not appreciating anything. So I,
Yeah.
I definitely felt that.
I
Yeah.
think the other element of the relationship stuff is that it's hard for people to form them when they're afraid of getting hurt. And
Yeah.
inevitably you have to be vulnerable in order to form deeper relationships. And inevitably with that you're going to get hurt by those relationships, or you can be.
Yeah, no, it's scary for a lot of people. But I think another interesting part about like the work culture is that we almost have a bit of a counterculture that's been like, growing recently.
Hmm.
Or I guess I don't know how long it's been going on for, but I've heard it a lot recently, where
Hmm.
a lot of people are like, I guess they're seeing how like, I mean, specifically the stock market's like, is it still going to shit like a lot right now?
Stock market, it's like, but I don't know if it's going to shit. It's just plateaued. It's
Okay.
it's not growing.
Well, just like the work like the work situation for everyone is kind of just going to
Yeah, the
shit.
work situation's bad. Yeah.
So everyone's just at this point going like, you might as well not wait to do anything that you really want to do because you're going to be just as unsuccessful either
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
So,
It's very, yeah, it's uncertain.
yeah,
I think people are choosing what they like because at this point there's no guarantee what's going to actually be good, or
exactly.
and like the jobs that people thought were going to be safe, like maybe being like a visual artist or being like,
Yeah,
like jobs like that are the ones that are the least safe. So
yeah.
it just there's a lack of knowledge. And then yeah, and then the AI stuff is interesting because I feel like you can talk about like a collective consciousness as well, but it's also the same like social media AI algorithms that polarize people and put people into these little bubbles and all that. And so I feel like
Hmm.
there's a lot of questions of like leisure time, and then people talk about like a post-scarcity world, which is I don't know if I fully believe it, but where AI like replace because that's what we're moving towards is AI
Yeah.
replacing people. And so the question is, it's like, what do you do when everything's replaced? And so I don't think
Then you get into
yeah, it's definitely like
Anima for my
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hyperbolic, but I mean, you do have to consider it because like there's just less jobs, for
Hmm.
sure. I forgot who was it? I think BuzzFeed, like a couple years ago, they laid off like I don't even know anymore, like 60% of their workforce.
Something
They
like that.
they're just going to replace them with large language
Yeah,
models.
but a common thought is like in science fiction, we often think about the last job and there being less and less jobs and AI replacing more and more jobs. But the reality is, with every technology boom, jobs become exterminated and then new jobs arise.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what I mean when was saying, I forgot what I was saying. I had a specific thought process for this, but anyways, the point is like when before computers there were no engineers, right? No software engineers.
Mhm.
And now you're seeing new jobs arise that require human beings because with even though AI is replacing jobs that were previously done by AI. I mean by human beings.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, for sure. I guess there's new jobs. I can't help but look at like like truckers who are like spend their
Hmm.
whole life just
Oh
like
yeah.
driving across the country, right? I mean, that's gonna get there's no doubt that's gonna get replaced with these self-driving
Yeah,
vehicles.
that's actually the biggest concern though, is like for people who are blue collar,
Yeah.
those jobs are going to get replaced and they're going to have to upskill themselves if they want to
Mhm.
stay afloat because
Yeah.
if they don't, then they're just yeah, there's nothing that's gonna replace that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that
I don't know. It's hard to say whether it's. I mean, obviously there's gonna be goods and bads to everything, but like I don't know with jobs like that where there's like a lot of driving or I mean those are just like inherently. I think it was rated one of the most unhealthy jobs in the world.
it's
Yeah, I
unhealthy,
was
but
gonna say like one good thing that comes out of that is that they're gonna have to do something else. Because
Yeah.
yeah.
imagine the toll that it takes on your body.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's definitely that's their lifestyle too. You
No.
can't
But
deny that, right?
yeah.
I don't know, but I mean that's yeah, you're right. I guess it's history. There was the Luddites during like the Industrial Revolution who were against all these new technologies, and so they would go around destroying or like trying to attack these factories because so many people lost their jobs. So I guess it's true with any big change. There's necessarily like a loss of like the old way of life, and so people are gonna suffer. But now we're okay with it. It's normal to us to not have
Hmm.
like horses pulling us everywhere. Like we just use cars and like
I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty, but I just don't think that anything is as straightforward as it seems. And
yeah,
like the imagined trajectory of AI consistently becoming more and more efficient, in my opinion, there's a lot more nuance to human consciousness and human contributions, and it won't become obvious until it becomes obvious that AI can't do it.
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
And
it's yeah,
all of these gaps are going to arise with very soon. Like, for example, how AI can't structure code very well yet. Now, is it going to be able to soon? Maybe, but I don't know. and
Yeah.
and so an opportunity arises right now where it's not structuring the code well. So like obviously a role arises now where you need a vibe code engineer who can look at the code and actually be able to structure it in a way that will scale well. That
Yeah.
didn't exist before. That's just one example, but there's a bazillion other things that are going to arise like that.
Yeah. No, it's definitely going to take a an interesting transition. I don't think we'll be able to predict how it's going to happen or anything, but yeah, I think there is a lot of people that are scared about it, but it isn't, like you said, it's not any different than the other technological
Yeah,
revolution.
it's the same. I think the only thing that's different, I would say about it is like it's scale,
Yeah.
because it's kind of just it's what you were saying. It's like the summation of all human knowledge, and unfortunately, we don't know what these companies like OpenAI train their data sets on. So it is probably a lot of racism or questionable content, but they need like all the data they can get. It's very odd. And then I don't know who, do you remember who told us this? But there was like a company that used it to try to automate hiring people. And so it became naturally, it had a preference towards white males. So they're
Interesting.
like, okay, don't hire off of race. And so then it hired off of if they played lacrosse or if like, like other things. So I just found other ways, right? Um,
I think that was that one grad student.
They like to drink pints with their buddies on Sundays.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah,
Like things like, and so it's fascinating, but it's also, like it gives you the question, can you ever really escape from those confines, because
yeah,
they're so ingrained in human nature. And so maybe that's where humans are going to be different from AI because humans have potential to like they're not just like we're not just like the summation of our knowledge, like we're people. So like we know that hiring people off of like playing lacrosse is not optimal,
yeah,
Like AI, that's what you were saying earlier. It's just like right now, at least AI is just math equations and it's like this optimized version of information, and maybe it's conscious, I don't know, but it's certainly not like us, and
yeah.
it's definitely not creative, right? Like
Hmm.
at the end of the day, it doesn't prompt itself and it doesn't go around doing things. There still has to be a human behind the screen on the other side prompting it and giving it direction. Right.
Yeah,
So it's still just a tool, although it's just a powerful tool, right?
yeah.
You know.
I would push back. I think that AI is creative because I think that um well, I think to some extent it's creative because the way that I view creativity is consolidating information and outputting something new,
Hmm.
like reading a bunch of books from different parts of the world in different eras, and then creating your own story based off of those things. And that's basically what AI is doing too. It's consolidating, it's taking a bunch of different text and then creating something new out of the prior data set. But the difference with AI and human creativity is that, well, first off, I think the difference is that we're not doing it in a weighted mechanism. Like AI does it in a probabilistic way, and humans have it do create in ways that are more intuitive and less mathematical. But
Hmm.
you can argue that humans also think in probabilistic ways. So but I think that there's another element to human creativity that AI lacks. But I do think that AI does create
You-
based off of my definition of creating.
Interesting. Yeah. No, that's interesting. I guess I can see that. I guess when I see like AI create music or poetry or other, it's definitely I consider it like a form of art, right? But I would consider it very separate and distinct because to my knowledge, I haven't seen AI. Although they did make a discovery with like a mathematical, like a matrix multiplication, I think. But it's good at taking knowledge and then finding like a midpoint in that knowledge and then giving it to you. But you see, I'm saying it doesn't give you anything that's like definitively new, and I guess that's a form of creativity as well, but I just feel like the lived experience, even just of being like a random person, and having like other things going on, like you said, that aren't just like probabilistic. It's almost like humans are irrational, right? And so I feel like that puts a different touch on things because people don't just get AI art. I don't think. I actually don't know, but
I'm sure some people will.
like people don't pay very much for AI art. Like people
Yeah.
still want, and I kind of honestly believe that like in the future there might be like AI automated things, and there would be a different sector for no AI was involved, because that's like a scarcity in itself, like people value that.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's interesting that you consider them creative but not agentic. That's
That's
yeah,
exactly what I wanted to say.
yeah,
Mm,
that's cool. Yeah,
Definitely creative, but definitely not agentic.
yeah, interesting.
yeah. Okay. Well, moving on to a little bit about I mean you're a fitness instructor, um, and also a high level like product leader, basically. So kind of how does the physical discipline of like training clients influence your and again, this is from me doing a very limited amount of research, but like product taste and your ability to kind of like handle a high stress environment. Do they at all translate or
I feel like this question confuses me.
it's sorry, I guess I mean kind of like in in like making sure that people can become disciplined and making sure that you can cater to somebody, how does that kind of influence your product taste and how you can cater to as many individuals as possible in like a startup or in the environment of like I don't know, like Project Pulse where you're talking with a bunch of other PMs and kind of trying to consolidate all this information
Yeah.
so that everyone's happy.
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is as a coach, they tell us to do client-centered coaching and also trainer-centered coaching and kind of meeting in the middle because the trainer wants to do a certain program with certain exercises because you choose them based off of what optimizes for the client's goals, but then the client wants to do things that they enjoy doing and that doesn't necessarily align with the science of how to optimize their way to their goal. So you kind of have to find a middle ground between the two.
Mhm.
Like, for example, I have a client who wants to gain muscle and lose fat as fast as possible. Or not as fast as possible, but just like actually be seeing results. But she has a lot of mobility issues and injuries from surgeries. So in order for you to be able to gain muscle, you need to be able to have a good, at least a decent range of motion in those areas. And so a lot of the stuff we've been doing the past month has been mobility stuff so that she can, and flexibility, so she can actually contract muscles and grow. But she's not happy with the results because she hasn't been gaining that much muscle or losing that much fat yet. And so we had to have a conversation during our last session where I'm like, I know now that you told me this, I also know that you're ready based off of the amount of progress we've made, but also had to highlight the fact that we needed to do this in order for her to be able to get that program. And even now, we still need to be doing mobility stuff, but it's going to be like 1/3 mobility and 2/3 muscle growth and that kind of exercise that you want, but kind of figuring out that middle ground where both pe- both both stakeholders in this project are feeling satisfied and the priorities are balanced and properly ranked.
Right.
Where you can't give her bench press because in her optimal world she would be doing bench press, but she doesn't have the shoulder mobility to do that. So how can you give her some kind of shoulder chest exercises that works for where she's currently at?
Yeah.
And the same for product stuff. Like everybody has different desires. Head on, we had a very, very adamant and verb and very involved Palestinian, which was amazing. A real gift to have somebody like that because a lot of Palestinians are very afraid to voice their opinions because of the consequences in terms of like speaking out There's a
Right.
lot of fear about the Mossad, which are the Israeli security FBI essentially, or yeah, and then also like among other fellow Palestinians, if they say something that isn't aligned with the status quo opinion, they're also afraid of that. Um, but also figuring out how can we balance between what the pro-Israeli people want, what the pro-Palestinian people want, and what's best for the just general product experience.
Right.
So having to figure out how to balance those, I think it just requires, at the end of the day, and everybody knows this, but product management requires a lot of empathy and then logical thinking in order to figure out how to solve the problem in a way that balances the different priorities.
Right. What do you think of the mind-body problem? Because I feel like you have a very interesting role because you're dealing with that on a regular basis. So, like, what's the body's relationship to the mind?
I think my theory, which has been my theory since IOC, and I haven't really been updating that theory, but it's not a final theory. It's just like a placeholder for now where I've kind of landed, is that there's a deeper level of consciousness and neuro imaging and neural modeling and just the structure of our neural web and our brain. It's like a symptom, and it's like the brain and then some black box thing and then the experience. So when there's some kind of damage to the brain, the pathway to that black box, that mysterious thing, is cut off, and so we can assume that if you're a materialist, it's causational, that that neurons and physical structures give rise to consciousness, but I have this suspicion that we're missing something entirely,
Yeah.
and I have no idea what it is. But that's kind of how I live. I live like with a degree of agnosticism because there's so many things that are unexplainable. And I think about it sometimes, and I grew up materialist until college, and sometimes I think that just like how people believe in God and stuff, that it's just wishful thinking, because it adds mysticism and this feeling of awe towards the human brain, and maybe it is just a materialist mind body situation, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's really exciting right now because if it is only physically derived, if consciousness is only physically derived, then we would be able to figure that out soon, because I think AI
Yeah.
will be able to help us create a physical model of the brain and connect it to sensory outputs. And so we'd be able to make progress in that. Even though yesterday Nico and I were talking and the question arose of like, how can you actually be able to tell if something is conscious or not?
Yeah.
So even if we were able to replicate a human being and an entire neural structure, an entire brain with connected to sensory organs, how would we actually be able to say if it's conscious or not?
Yeah. I also wonder if you just had like a one-to-one replica of a brain or something like that, and then you just lit it up, like would it manufacture memories based on like the entire? Because like if you had the whole structure, then you'd have different connections that would happen. But
I actually just realized that if we made a transhuman and if they had the same experience, nope, that's still. I mean, it's just like the solipsism thing where you're like, are we actually all conscious beings or is it just me? And
Yeah.
no one else is actually a conscious being, and there's not really any way to disprove it.
yeah,
Yeah, the hard problem.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just the Matrix.
Yeah.
Nobody else is real.
That's
But I feel like even though we can't speculate right now, or maybe you guys have some kind of thought that I'm not thinking about, I still feel like it's a really exciting time because a lot of things are going to be kind of become uncovered, and then new new ideas are going to arise, and then nonetheless we'll still make serious strides in our understanding of consciousness.
Yeah. I think do you remember there's like a relatively recent study on like approaching neural correlates of consciousness or something like that?
Yeah, I didn't I linked it somewhere. Yeah,
Yeah.
that there's more talk. I mean, I think about a year ago, 77. I don't know. I'm pulling these numbers from my head, but like a large amount of scientists signed a document saying that animals are conscious or sentient.
Was that
So
after
yeah, yeah,
the video of they saw a video of a cow scratching
yeah, that's
its
right.
ass
With a broom.
with a broom? Yeah.
Yeah, so the mind was blown because it was using the broom as as a tool,
Yeah. And
which
they're
they didn't
like,
think was
and this
possible.
cow is
Yeah,
conscious.
evidence that it's conscious. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Yeah. No, there's definitely more talk on consciousness, and I think people are realizing a lot of the older thought is kind of silly, and also no one. I think everyone's collectively realizing that no one really knows what it is because people are debating if AI was conscious, right?
Yeah.
So you can argue about it, and then you quickly realize that you don't even know if like you're conscious. Or
Yeah.
you don't even know what it is in itself. You just know that whatever is happening right now in this instance is happening, right?
Yeah.
And you don't even know what that is. But we do have like correlates, and then people like David Chalmers say that science can't do anything about it, or you can't fundamentally can't approach it. Yeah, I don't know. I hope not, but but
Yeah.
yeah.
It would be satisfying just to know.
Right? You know how cool it would be if I could assume your consciousness or something, see from your perspective or something, or if we find out it's all one big like
Like cosmic
yeah,
panpsychism.
like a manifold of
Yeah.
consciousness, and we're all part of, like in Hinduism where they believe in like like we're all in the Atman's dream or something,
Oh
or like we're all
yeah.
part of one dream, and so it's all an illusion of these barriers. I don't know, it's cool. But stuff like that's more relevant for sure. I feel like I don't know what it was like when you were in IOC, but I feel like it was good timing for starting the club because it's only
Hmm.
If it's
become
all speculative when we
yeah.
were talking about it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it's cool. Yeah, and then that's got to be very trippy because
It's
like
super trippy.
yeah,
Yeah.
because you're starting it and then you're seeing the whole world kind of wake up to those ideas.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But we didn't talk about it because we thought it was going to become a reality in 4 years.
Uh-huh.
We
Yeah.
talked about it because it was just really interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's got to give you a big ego boost. That's some pioneer stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would give me a big ego boost if I was like, this is gonna happen soon, and I know that we need to talk about it.
Uh-huh.
But that's not how I was thinking about
Yeah.
it.
You were there before the wave. You're
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Nice, go
Okay.
me. Um, I have like 10 more minutes also.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll get through the end of it real quick. Okay. So just last three questions. So I was looking through your LinkedIn that you sent me, and it mentioned a long-term aim to kind of tackle more like the U.S. prison system specifically.
Yeah,
I was just curious, how do like conversation platforms and like collective consciousness of human energy eventually kind of scale into tools that could be used for that type of reform or like systemic issues like criminal justice? I guess other ones would be applicable as well, but yeah.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think the most direct application is I think that being able to freely explore ideas is a symptom of a healthy society.
Mhm.
And we had that, and now, I mean, it feels like we had that, and it feels like now is a time where it's not as open. You're not able to, things are far more polarized, and so you're not able to explore things and ideas as freely as you used to be. And so that's a symptom of an unhealthy society. And then technologies like Head On enable us to be able to do that once more, even though on a societal level we're not able to do that. So it's technology that helps tackle that issue. And then with the regeneration of true free thought and open discussion, we're able to have our voters make policy decisions that are not informed by what is taboo and what is not taboo, but rather a genuine, true exploration and being able to find what they actually believe in through having weighed out all the potential ideas and perspectives rather than just going for what is the status quo.
Right.
So that's the main thing. I feel like I'm very passionate about the criminal justice system because I feel like it's one of those issues that it's not super popular, but it's extremely problematic. Like we have a million people in a million or 2 million people in prison right now, and it's a very convoluted system, and a lot of people are just stuck in it. A lot of good people are stuck in it, and
Hmm.
it derives from slavery.
Yeah.
So slavery, then there was a brief, beautiful time called the Restoration, and then there was Jim Crow, which was like de facto segregation in the
Right.
60s, where it wasn't legal to have slavery anymore, but it was legal to have things as long as they were separate but equal. But reality was that everything was just separate so that black people could have worse living standards and no rights. Also, Jews were a part of segregation. So if I don't know if you saw signs that were shown in the South, but it was like no dogs, no blacks, and no Jews. Um, and then once that was outlawed, and it took a few decades for segregation to no longer be considered right, even though it was outlawed, it took time for policy to shift. In the 80s, there was the war on drugs and the stop and frisk policies and stuff like that. And then because people of color were stopped and frisked much more often, they were more so imprisoned um and so then the racist stereotype of black people being criminals manifested as truth. So because there was that racist thinking, cops would stop and frisk black people more often, and then it became the case that they actually were criminal. There were higher percentages of black people and Latinos in prisons than white people, even though the rate of crime is exactly the same among both groups.
Right.
So that brings us to today, and nobody's really talking about it as a primary problem, even though we're supposed to be the land of the free.
Right.
And so that's why I'm especially passionate about that issue. And I think it's taboo because the second you meet somebody who's an offender, it's like really taboo, and you don't want to press into what they did and why they were in prison and stuff like that. But
Right.
when you start talking to people who have been a part of the prison system and how their lives have been impacted, it humanizes the issue and it allows you to explore it. And so if different people who are part of the prison system and even cops, right? Because ACAB is such a popular phrase, and I think that's also problematic because a lot of people. I did a trip in high school called Sojourn to the Past, but then after I graduated that summer, I decided to go again because he started doing trips with cops to educate them about the racist policing history, and literally so many people become cops because they want to do good for their community and protect people and just uphold order, because inevitably there's always going to be troublemakers and there's going to be people that rob stores and kill people and do bad things, and it's up for each person to decide whether they think that policing is necessary. But a lot of the reason why people become cops is because they want to be protectors of their communities, and so they don't know the history of policing, and so they went on this trip and they learned about the everything that I just said, and a lot of them were baffled. And then at the same time, there was a girl who grew up in the projects of SF who was on this trip too. And she's like badass 19-year-old with a social worker who is like her mom basically, and
Yeah.
is having a really good influence on her instead of taking the wrong path. And they were there. And so they had discussions. And one time she just like burst out because somebody was saying something and she was like, this is so wrong for me to hear. And I just need you to hear my perspective right now. And
Right.
that was like a hair-raising experience for me to witness,
Yeah.
where these two people who are on opposing sides basically are having a very genuine and honest discourse with one another and learning from one another. And so I feel like part of the issue is not having those conversations and for there to be no place for that. And, even with books, everybody has an agenda. And so you as an individual can read books from different perspectives, but humans naturally want to read stuff that confirms their pre-existing biases. So having a platform like this where it's like talk to a police officer and like maybe if you were around all your friends who are anti-cop, you would say certain things. But if you're able to have a conversation like that, where you're just able to log on and be like, ask me anything, I'm a cop, that's very different. And like
Yeah.
even able to talk to cops or cops from the Bay versus cops from Alabama, from Birmingham, like
Yeah.
these are very different experiences, and it's important to be able to engage honestly with them
Yeah.
or have access to people who are engaging honestly with them. And I feel like that's a big, 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 big step in the right direction.
Yeah. And tools like HeadOn, you're definitely making headway already. So
Yeah.
that's
And,
awesome.
and
Yeah.
Israel Palestine's the hardest one. So that's one the two main reasons why the founders decided to do Israel Palestine is one, because it's the hardest conflict. It has religion, it has and history from antiquity, it has so many different groups of people. Um, so it's very convoluted, and so thinking about that as the baseline, and then the second thing is the two founders are Israeli, both have different political leanings.
Hmm.
So it just landed. There's this concept called product founder fit, which is just that the founder needs to have skin in the game
Yeah.
for building what they're building, and those two have a lot of skin in the game. So and passion about that topic specifically.
Right.
So it's a really good fit for them.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very noble cause. I think I've learned a lot about the US prison system and just criminal justice in general over a lot of my general courses that I had to take early on were like I think human geography and then American history, and it's definitely one of the things you just can't ignore as far as I don't know, just the implications of like you said, slavery and how it kind of pervaded through the prison system, and now it's kind of
Yeah.
its like continuation. Um, yeah, I guess on a lighter note to kind of finish us out, I saw that one of your top book recommendations was The Courage to Be Disliked. And
Mm,
I actually have that book like on my desk in my room right now. I haven't read through most of it yet, but I know it talks a great deal about like Adlerian like psychology and like
mm,
specifically I guess the idea that kind of resonates with me in it is like that your past doesn't determine your future, and like there's a lot of talk about like people create goals so that they can become the person that they want to be, but sometimes they don't realize that they have more comfort in being somebody lesser than who they want to actually be. But I guess how has it kind of informed your
wait,
vision for?
say that one more time.
It was a little bit of a convoluted way to say it, but I think what I was getting at was like the passage that I was reading specifically was when he was talking to the younger guy in the book, and he was saying that he has like maladaptive behavior because he wants to be flawed.
Right. Like the kid staying in his room
Yeah,
because he wants his parents' attention and support. And if he were to leave the room and go out into the real world, then he would get hurt. Like
yeah.
he would expose himself to a bunch of things, and then his parents would stop paying attention to him too.
Exactly. Yeah. That type of thing. But I guess, yeah, how has that kind of informed your ideas on like social reform and like what you want to do, I guess?
Mm. I feel like that book really informs how I can influence the issues I care about the
Mhm.
most. In terms of social reform, I am very obsessed with MLK,
Mhm.
and I need to learn more about the other icons, but I read MLK's biography, and he was able to bring together so many people, and it's inspiring because it's very easy to feel helpless in the current world, and so his legacy really inspires us because we can do a little bit and it can go a very long way if there's a lot of us involved and we're all playing a role in the change. But like the difficulties of doing that. And obviously MLK didn't do that. He did that with a whole bunch of talented people who
Hmm.
all made this happen. Um, but I think that the main thing I want to say about Courage to be Disliked is that the thing that stuck with me the most was that example where you go to a doctor and he says that you got and you have a cold or something like that, and you're like, did I why did I get this cold? And he's like, oh, it's because you went out in the rain and you didn't bring a jacket.
Hmm.
And then imagine just leaving after that. And this is in his chapter about, he says that trauma doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah.
And as opposed to going to the doctor and saying, okay, I got a cold, what am I going to do to get better? And I felt like that was a big thought for me from that book because it doesn't really matter what your current circumstances, it's more important what you're going to do with the circumstance that you're in.
What actionable causes can you do?
Yeah. And so yeah, that's kind of how I live my life is with what I have right now, what can I do? And
Hmm.
where can I'm very impact driven. Like that's my biggest motivation is being impact driven, but how can I use my creative elements and my ability to talk to people very well and connect with people very deeply and all of these other skill sets that come naturally to me and all of these different things that energize me, how can I reflect on what I've been given to to have the impact that I want in the world? And also on a less individualistic note, how can I connect with other people in order to do that as well?
Hmm. Yeah. No, it's an amazing book. I every time I read it, I feel like I learn something new every time I turn a page on that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess just last question on the topic of like reflecting and stuff. I guess looking back at your time at IOC, is there like one last question that kind of or one question about the human mind that you thought you had the answer to back then, or seemed more fleshed out, but now in this kind of like new age or like with your work on AI, has it been made like, that much more complicated? I know we kind of already got into the weeds of it a little bit earlier, but I was just wondering if you had just one that's really stuck in your brain.
I had a thought when I read over that question earlier before we started talking, but it has left my brain.
Sorry. I guess
Yeah, I don't really have I think
we might have already
yeah,
talked about it
I
earlier.
actually don't have an answer to that question now. I had one, but now I don't.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I mean, we did already talk about kind of how it's made like the like workforce a little bit harder to talk about, and like it's just made I don't know. AI is just an interesting tool. It's made a lot of things easier, but it's also made questions like about consciousness that much more complicated. So yeah, I guess yeah. Is there anything you want to kind of like I don't know, give to the viewers at all just before?
Yeah. Well, I really like this last question. Okay, actually, you know what? I think I think most of the people who are listening are probably college students,
Mhm.
and I can give some wisdom from somebody who went through it and is now on the other side that I feel like when I was in college, and I think this was right of me to do, I felt like I really needed to make the most of everything while I was there. Like I took gap semesters so that I would have time to reflect on what was going on and be able to make come back and make the most of it because when you're in it, everything goes by really fast. So I definitely think it's important to be reflective about what you're doing with your time there, not take it for granted because the resources at Cal are there's a lot of resources and opportunities and it's easy to take those for granted after some time of being there. So I think it's really important to be reflective on what you're doing with your time and think about what's most important to you and where you're putting your time. And that also is true about classes because the professors give you a whole bunch of shit to do. But at the end of the day, you should still be deciding how much energy you're going to put to those things. And even if you're going to do those things, because that's one of my biggest regrets is that I feel like I took classes very seriously and what the professors told you to do, and they know what's good for you. But then I feel like they also assign a lot of stuff that isn't necessary and is very time and energy consuming. So I wish that I took classes a little bit less seriously, or at least still took them seriously, but thought about why I was doing those things. Because
Hmm.
I just took the professor's word at surface level, and in hindsight, it would have been better to have done other things with that time while being there. But the main thing I wanted to say is that it's important to take things seriously, but it's also important to just allow randomness into your life and
Yeah.
to say yes to random things and to explore as much as possible. And because all of these random experiences are going to allow you to gain clarity about what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing, and to get to know yourself better and to learn more about life that way. And so, not to be too rigid in terms of where you're putting your energy.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, that connects back to what we were talking about earlier about the work culture and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. Sorry if we kept you a bit long.
No, it's
Yeah.
good. We had a good conversation. And
Yeah.
also, I wanted to shout out my I'm writing a book kind of. I started when I was a senior and
Hmm.
it hasn't been a priority at all for me recently, but I have almost half of it up on Substack right now, and it's called Chronicles of a UC Berkeley Student, and it's just my reflections on experiences. So just
Hmm.
like how I said, open, keep yourself open to randomness. I had a pretty random experience at Berkeley. I feel like I experienced a lot of things that people who have more of a straight line major and a straight line series of goals experience, and I felt like it allowed me to have insight into the university that people who have more of a focused approach wouldn't
Hmm.
be able to. I had more of an exploratory one, and so I just write about different experiences that happened to me and life reflections and lessons from those experiences. So just want to shout that out in case anybody wants to take a read. And I also write it because of the historical times I lived through and in terms of the pandemic and the Israel Palestine protests.
Yeah. Yeah, of course we'll put like a link to it in the video when we post it and everything. But yeah,
Thanks.
thank you so much.